Good evening. My name is Anthony Voltaggio, and I'm with the Orange Catholic Foundation. And on behalf of the Most Reverend Bishop Van, I want to welcome you all to the Arboretum at Christ Cathedral campus. Tonight, Father Spitzer will be presenting the science behind the Tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe, but you may have noticed an image of Our Lady next to me. This is no ordinary artist rendition. In 1999, His Eminence Cardinal Rivera, Archbishop of Mexico, authorized the removal of the Tilma from the Basilica of Mexico City and created a digital file. From that file, only 4 replicas were authorized to be produced with the exact color and dimensions of Our Lady. Named the Missionary image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, with the blessing of the bishops of Mexico, these images travel now throughout the world, bringing Our Lady directly to the people. Many of us may never be fortunate enough to visit her at the Basilica in Mexico City, so she has come here to you. For the next 22 days, you may visit her and venerate her at many of the locations throughout the diocese. She will remain here at Christ Cathedral until the evening of Monday, November 4th, where at 6:30 a rosary will be recited, a serenata sung, a special mass followed immediately by a celebration of mariachi music and folklorico dancers. You are all welcome. Now, to make it easy to track her travels across the next 22 days, a calendar and a map of the locations can be found on the diocesan website, rcbo.org/Tilma. There have been many reported mystical and miraculous experiences with this image, but none more important than her leading the heart of the faithful to her son, Jesus. Now, we have many people to thank for making this visit of the missionary image possible, but just a few for special recognition. We'd like to recognize Carrie Lloyd, His Excellency Auxiliary Bishop Tim Fryer, the Very Reverend Father Al Baca, who's the Episcopal Vicar of Ecumenism for the diocese, Kathleen Conway, and Miranda Emdy. And to all the others on the executive committee, we are very grateful. Now, before I introduce Father Spitzer, I just want you to know that at the end of his presentation, he will be in the back of the room with signed books that can be purchased and inscribed right here and now. Now, when I asked Kathleen for his bio to introduce him tonight, she sent it over, and I said, "No, Kathleen, I want the short bio." She said, "That is the short bio." So Father Robert Spitzer, S.J., PhD, is the president of the Maggia Center of Reason and Faith and the Napa Institute. He was the president of Gonzaga University from 1998 to 2009, where he increased the student body by 75%, oversaw the construction of 20 new facilities, and raised over $200 million for scholarships and buildings. He's the author of 19 books, including the award-winning books New Proofs for the Existence of God and Science, Reason and Faith, and Discovering the Bible. He has authored many scholarly articles on faith and science, metaphysics, happiness, and ethics. So you may see Father Spitzer on his own weekly EWTN television show called Father Spitzer's Universe. He's appeared on The Larry King Show, the History Channel, the Today Show, and the PBS series. He started 7 institutes dedicated to faith and reason, happiness, purpose in life. He was a professor at Georgetown University, Seattle University, and at Gonzaga University, and was awarded the Medal of both Georgetown University, Teaching Medal of both Georgetown University and Seattle University. He has held 2 major academic chairs, the Frank Schranz Endowment Chair in Professional Ethics at the University of Seattle and the John Aram Chair of Business Ethics at Gonzaga University. Has won multiple academic and professional awards, including the most prestigious honorary doctorate of the DSmet Medal for Gonzaga University, and the Aquinas Medal for Catholic Scholarship. So without further ado, we'd like to invite Father Spitzer.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for that fine introduction and humorous one. These steps are amazing. For blind people, the irregularity presents good challenges. Anyway, I have to begin as I always do, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for your blessings to us, the blessing especially of this wonderful Tilma, its miraculous nature, what it points to in terms of hope for us and hope for our world. We ask you tonight to send your Holy Spirit down upon us to inspire, guide, and protect us as we reflect on this most marvelous gift that you have shared with us for the sake of the church, the sake of culture, and your kingdom. We ask all of these things through Jesus our Lord. Amen. And Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, I'm going to begin just by attempting to give a little overview of the story of Juan Diego. Since I assume the vast majority of you know this in detail, I will keep this very brief, but just to get a sense of what is going on here so you'll understand the image in Our Lady's eyes. I'm just going to give you a quick overview. So Juan Diego, a Native American and South American who basically was proceeding on his way to work, actually encounters Our Lady, and when he does, she asks him to go and talk to Bishop Zumaraga, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, and she would like a chapel built on Tepeyac Hill there. And Juan Diego dutifully goes over, this is on December 9th, over to the bishop, and the bishop goes, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. So, of course, Juan Diego goes back and encounters Our Lady once again the same day, December 9th, and she says, no, you go back to the bishop and tell him that I said I would like this church built. So he goes back to the bishop, and the bishop says, well, I'm not going to do this without some sign from Our Lady that it's really her that's present. So December the 10th, Juan Diego is heading over, he heads back, he tells the bishop, he tells Our Lady, well, he needs a sign. And Our Lady says, well, okay, come back here tomorrow and you will find one. Well, Juan Diego's uncle got sick, and so Juan Diego was worried. He was trying to find a doctor and a priest, so he's sort of trying to circumvent his way around where he met Our Lady and trying to avoid her so that he could help out his uncle. And of course, she intersects with him very suddenly and he says, Juanito, where are you going? And he goes, oh, well, my uncle's sick. And she says, don't worry. Everything's going to be all right with him. I need you to go back to that bishop now, and I need you to tell him, tell him there's going to be a sign. So of course, she says, come back here tomorrow, and you'll find it. So of course, when Juan Diego goes back, and there he sees Castilian roses growing there, on the mountain. He's putting them into his tilma, and he's going to take those back and show the bishop this sign. So he goes back to the bishop with his tilma full of the Castilian roses, and then as he's dropping the tilma, you can see that these roses are kind of pouring out there. And then suddenly an image, the image, of course, we see right over here, shows up on the tilma at the very moment, really, that the roses are sort of cascading toward the floor. Now, this is kind of an important thing to see. So when, Juan Diego comes back, the bishop is not there by himself. So he's there with a whole retinue of people. And as we'll see in the image in Juan Diego's eye, he's there with several servants. He's got a translator. He's obviously has a Castilian friend who's there. He's stroking his beard and looking at this scene with the roses and the image appearing and so forth. Now, what the main thing to recognize is that Our Lady is there looking at this scene. And where is she standing? So Zumárraga here, so just to kind of imagine that they're kind of gathered around. And then Juan Diego is kind of in front of him, and he's, pouring out the roses onto the ground. And Our Lady is there, then she's going to be to Juan Diego's left, so right around here, and she's going to be to Zumárraga's right. So she's kind of standing, between the two of them, looking on as Juan Diego's pouring these roses out on the onto the ground there from his tilma. And so she's standing. I'll explain this in a moment, but she's hovering about 2 to 2.5 feet off the ground. And because of that, her eyes are looking down. And she's favoring the side of Juan Diego a little bit, so her head is tilted to the left as she's looking at this scene. Now, it's important to recognize that the scene that the Blessed Mother that you're seeing there on the tilma, this is what she is doing. She's not. This is not from the perspective of her looking out from the tilma where her image appears. The image on the tilma is from the perspective of where she is standing between Juan Diego and Bishop Zumárraga there. And you can clearly see then that she's above the ground, looking down slightly to the left. And you can see then from this perspective that she emblazons her portrait on the tilma from that perspective, the very perspective of her looking at the scene between Juan Diego and Zumárraga. Okay, so that kind of sets the tone. Now, obviously, the minute this happens, Bishop Zumárraga, you can see his translator is speaking full blast to him in his ear. He's dressed in a Franciscan robe. We'll see that in a moment. Looks very much like his portrait, as I'll explain later. But he is converted. So he decides to give the order to start building the chapel on Tepeyac Hill. I don't have to go into the extraordinary, parts of the image, but I'll just say many miracles have occurred through the tilma since 1531. December 12th, 1531. That's by the Julian calendar. That'll be important when we're looking at the stars on the tilma, on the mantle of Our Lady. And so hold on to that for just a moment. But it is the Julian calendar, December 12th, 1531. The main thing, though, is that this tilma has been unprotected for a long, long time, and it has endured everything, including terrorists, putting bombs, literally put a bomb underneath the picture itself in a vase of flowers. And the whole thing blows up, right? Damages all the whole surrounding area. In fact, there's a big, bronze crucifix. You know how tough bronze is, right? It literally takes that bronze crucifix and just blows it backward all the way until the top of the cross is practically touching the table. A very nice explosion there. But there's Our Lady, no glass in front of her, undisturbed. Not a burn, nothing, no smoke damage, nothing. And it's just truly extraordinary. And as we shall see, a scientific examination of this image makes it all the more, not just interesting, but almost unquestionably miraculous. So let's take a look more closely at it and take a look at, well, what's gone on? Now, since 1956 and then later 1978, there have been a lot of investigations of this, especially by ophthalmologists and a variety of different kinds of painters, forensic specialists, and a variety of other disciplines have looked at the image of Our Lady. But let me just go through 7 extraordinary features that have been noticed and are pretty much impossible to explain naturalistically. There is Philip Callahan. We'll talk about him in a moment. He's important in this investigation because he does a lot with different kinds of spectrometry. And he is a physicist at the University of Florida who examined the Tilma and did a variety of different tests. And the infrared test is particularly important, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The interesting thing about Callahan is he was not only obviously a PhD in biochemistry and in infrared spectrometry and photography. He was also an artist in his own right. And so as we're talking about some of the details here, some of the unusual characteristics of the Tilma, his research is going to come into play again and again and again. Now, I've got this kind of detailed with a bunch of footnotes in my book, Christ, Science, and Reason, in chapter 5. But let me just go through these things with you. It'll be brief, but I don't want to underestimate the importance of each of these things. Let's start with the material itself. This is an agave cactus fiber tilma. The fabric is a very, very low-grade cactus fiber fabric. The normal time span for such a fabric would be about 30 years, maybe 50 years max, before there would be not just noticeable decomposition, but now you're talking about significant, substantial decomposition after 50 years, right? Because the molecular structure of an agave cactus fiber, having a high degree of organic compounds that are not necessarily stable, will lead to the natural decomposition of the fabric. Certainly within 50 years, you'd have a huge amount of noticeable decomposition. Here's the kicker. That fabric has been around since 1531. We're nigh on 500 years, just like a few years short of 500 years. And there she blows. That Tilma is looking just fine. That Tilma has no real noticeable decomposition. Impossibile. This is not naturalistically explicable from the word go. How could you have such a perfect replica? By the way, as we shall talk about in just a moment, there are no varnishes on it. There was no sizing done to it. There's no plaster to be found on it. So just to let you know, there's no preservatives that have been taken place. And by the way, it's been enduring smoke from all the candles and the incense, and not even in a glass frame for many, many centuries, right? Unprotected. There's been the Tilma, and of course, people are touching it and doing all kinds of things that would ordinarily enhance decomposition, yet the decomposition is not there. Number one, that's really unusual. I would say naturalistically inexplicable. Let's take a look at the second element here, and that is the pigment, and the actual picture itself. Again, we notice the absence of decomposition in the actual picture of Our Lady. I'm not going to call it a painting of Our Lady, and you'll see why in a moment. I'm just going to talk about it as the image of Our Lady. The image of Our Lady is, you can see her there with her mantle and her, rose robe, her blue mantle with the stars, and you can see her face and the detail of her face and so forth. So everywhere where the original image of Our Lady looking at the scene is, there has been no noticeable decomposition, no fragmenting, no flacking, no decomposition in the pigment whatsoever. And by the way, this is highly unusual. I'll talk about it in just a moment. And furthermore, we can see that the luster, not even the luster of the paint, has been compromised over nearly 500 years. This, again, is just mind-boggling. It's very inexplicable. There's no over-varnishes and so forth that have been applied. Obviously, there some modern attempts to do some things have maybe altered it, in some minor ways, but the luster of the colors has simply not faded. Now, there are several parts of the tilma which were added to the image of Our Lady later. So the rays that are coming out of her head, for example, the moon underneath her feet, the angels that are holding up the moon, and a few other details were painted in later by an artist. Now, what you have to notice is where the painted in sections are, you can clearly see that there is a flacking, there's flaking, there's segmenting, and very noticeable decomposition. And in addition to that, you can see almost the tar-like discoloration of those areas which were produced by human beings. The ones of Our Lady, none of that occurred. Every place where paint was added, you can definitely see that the luster is still the same. Again, this is not naturalistically explicable. We have no pigments that will act like this in any circumstance whatsoever that anyone has ever heard of. So, and by the way, how are you going to even get human technology to produce this effect? Because everything you could apply to it would do what? Decompose over the course of time. And that decomposition under microscopy would be noticeable, but not on the image of Our Lady. That's the second non-naturalistic phenomenon, explicable phenomenon. Let's get to the third one. The pigments themselves. Now, this one, has, a little difficulty being explained. First of all, it seems clear that the person who was the custodian of, of Our Lady, of Our Lady's image, he actually did take some fibers from the area where the image of Our Lady is, the authentic image of Our Lady. He handed it over to a fellow, a biochemist named Fritz Hahn. Fritz Hahn supposedly gave it over to the Kaiser Wilhelm director, Richard Kuhn. Now, Kuhn himself, the rumor was that Kuhn did the test on the fabrics and made this determination. But it may have been someone else, an assistant perhaps at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, that made this conclusion. But whatever the case may be, a conclusion came from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute basically indicating that there was no, the colors of Our Lady's robe and mantle and so forth. These colors were no known natural pigment. So there's no natural pigment that will produce these colors. Now, if that was the conclusion, then again, you have a third non-naturalistically explicable element in this painting. Where did the pigments come from? Remember, in 1531, there were no synthetic pigments. So you couldn't have manufactured it by human means in 1531. The uniqueness of the pigment, again, seems to be non-naturalistically explicable. But of course, I think subsequent verification needs to be done to make sure that this test that was performed by Kaiser Wilhelm actually was the case. Now, let's go down to a fourth element. It gets really interesting at this juncture because we're bringing in a variety of artists to analyze this cloth. But before I do, I want to just talk about the actual preparation of the tilma itself for painting. As you know, a rough agave, or maybe you don't know, but a rough agave cactus fiber tilma is very rumpled, right? It's very irregular. I mean, to get something, to be painted accurately, we have to, use what's called sizing or some other canvas preparation or some over varnishing method to prepare the canvas, right? Or to prepare the surface on which the painting is going to be made. If you've got all kinds of bumps and irregularities in a tilma fabric and so forth and so on, that's hardly a flattened canvas that has been sized. And in those days, they normally sized the canvas with plaster. We find no elements there of sizing whatsoever. Again, Philip Cernan Callahan verified that. In several different low-level X-ray examinations, and he also did it by means of infrared investigation as well. So an infrared investigation, and said there is no evidence of sizing. Every single artist who has recognized this has said, this is not possible to produce by means of a human painter. It just cannot be done on this kind of a rumpled surface. The canvas has to be flattened, and it has to have some substance that will keep it flattened over the long term. Because if you don't do that, what will happen is that the canvas or the surface of the painting will bubble. And when it will bubble, it'll literally push the paint up and then, of course, wreck the painting, fragment the painting, fleck the painting all over the place where this irregularity occurs. And it will occur in an untreated surface. All I can say is, not on the tilma. Irregularities are to be found everywhere. It does not disturb the painting at all. There was no flattened surface on which the painting was made. The painting was made perfectly on the rumpled surface. No artist, no human artist can do this. Very bizarre. Okay, is there a naturalistic explanation? It seems not. Is there a human explanation? In terms of the painters who have examined it, somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 professional, internationally renowned painters. No way. None of them thinks it is possible for a human painter to have produced this. So again, we're left with kind of scratching our heads. By the way, there's a very, very good set now of free articles. There's a historiographer by the name of Daniel Castellano. And if you just go to Google and put in Daniel Castellano, Guadalupe Tilma, he has a 14-part historiographical series that has everything you would ever want to know about the tilma and its production. He has interviews with all 26 of these international painters and so forth, and all of them agree on one thing. the fact that there's no sizing, there's no material to keep the material flattened, there's no over varnishing, impossible to explain. Next thing that's really difficult to explain, again on the artistic level, there is no undersketching, none. So there's like normally an artist will do some kind of a sketch of what is to be there, but you can see very clearly through infrared analysis, you can see that there's no undersketching there at all. There's not a single brushstroke, not a single brushstroke in the entire image of Our Lady. There is, of course, on the rays, there is a brushstroke, of course, on the there are brushstrokes on the moon and the angel, etc. So all of these things, we do have, absolutely a manifestation of brushstroke. Now, without any undersketching and without any brushstrokes, it seems very clear that this image was made in one fell swoop. It was not applied, right? Paint was not applied in layers. Paint was not applied here in this place and then next in this place, etc. It was never corrected, etc. When we see the perfection of the image, it'll blow you away to see the perfection of the image. Yet it seems like it was done in 1 second. Boom! It appears on the Tilma precisely as the story of Juan Diego portrays it. I know we'll get into the whole thing of, well, could this story have been made up? Do we have evidence? I'll talk about the skeptical thing and the Codex Escalada in just a moment. But for the right now, what I want to make sure you see is this looks like it came on the Tilma in one fell swoop. How would that happen? I have no idea. Not naturalistically explicable. Certainly not a human production. At least back in 1531, you couldn't just blast something right onto the Tilma in one fell swoop. Let's go to two other features of the image, and we're starting to get into some very fascinating territory in a moment. The next thing to notice is this, that if you look at, the fullness of the lips of Our Lady in the picture, the reason her lips look so full and the reason her eyes, seem so alive is because there are very rough fibers that are protruding upward from the Tilma. Now, these are just irregular, rough fibers, right? This is not a canvas. This is an agave cactus Tilma, which has all kinds of rough fibers. In this particular case, what you notice is that the lips of Our Lady literally follow one of these rough, obtruding fibers coming up through the surface there. And so it almost seems like the painting was made around that rough fiber, so it would bring out the fullness of Our Lady's lips. And then the ones around the eyes were the same thing, the rough fibers which are giving depth and liveliness to Our Lady's eyes in the painting. Those are rough fibers that are just arbitrarily obtruding over the surface of the Tilma. And again, Camps Rivera and all kinds of other artists say, this is not humanly possible. No artist can simply construct an entire painting around like about 30 irregular, obtruding, protruding, fibers, thick fibers that just happen to be there on this Tilma, and literally put those things to use to make Our Lady more beautiful and more lively in the painting. So all I can tell you is, again, not humanly explicable. And of course, by any standard of pure chance that you could get an image like that puts together the lips, etc., with the actual, the contour of the lips with the actual protruding fiber is just, megatonnage improbable. So we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so far it's really strange, very seemingly non-naturalistic. But as they say in the ads, there's more, a lot more. The first thing is, when we get, to this point, we're going to be concentrating now on the eyes of Our Lady. And there are several features of her eyes that really are almost beyond our technology today to produce. I mean, you couldn't produce it with our technology today, but you can use the best of our technology to recognize it. Let's take feature number one. Feature number one of the eyes is that each of the eyes, each of the corneas, right? The cornea is that external transparent surface that we have on our eyes, protects our eyes, etc. It's kind of like a shiny substance that reflects light and reflects the images that we are looking at. One way in which this strange reflection occurs, it's what's called the Purkinje-Sanson effect. Now, the Purkinje-Sanson effect is basically because our eyeball is curved, right? We have a curvature along the surface of the cornea. What happens is if we're looking at a particular image, then you can see that the reflection in our corneas is really a triple reflection. There's one toward the nose, right, toward the very extreme left of the right cornea, and that would be a right side up image. Then a slightly, smaller, again, right side up image that's next to it, following the curve in the center of the eye, and then following that to the edge of the eye, let's say to the right of the right cornea, you can see an upside down image, right, in the eye. So if you were an ophthalmologist and you wanted to take a look at, at what I was looking at, you would actually see a triple reflection there. 2 right side up images and an upside down image. Now, okay, now there is a Spaniard who's looking out. In other words, he's part of the retinue of Zumárraga, Bishop Zumárraga, and he's on the extreme right side. And we'll talk about him in a moment. But it's very clear. He's got a very Castilian face. He has a beard. Trust me, you'll see why we can notice this in just a moment. He has a beard, and he's stroking his beard. You do not need any computer-enhanced magnification or any one of these Aste-Tansman kind of processes to amplify the image to see him. Just a regular magnifying glass. And this Spaniard, this Castilian face with the beard, is very noticeable, both in the reflection in the left cornea and the right cornea. Now, from 1956 to 1978, everybody thought that was Juan Diego. But really, it is not Juan Diego. It is, as I said, it's obviously some kind of a friend, part of the retinue of Bishop Zumárraga with a Castilian face. He's stroking his beard. Okay, it's not Juan Diego, and you'll see why in a moment. But anyway, be that as it may, with a magnifying glass, you can see the Purkinje-Sanson effect. You can see the 2 reflections right there following the curvature of the eye of the cornea, and then in the corner, as it were, you can see the upside down, smallest image of the same Spaniard right there, just like any other human eye that has curvature, right? So the curvature of the retina is perfectly portrayed. And that, let me tell you how many people knew about the Purkinje-Sanson effect in 1531. 0. There weren't, and no one even recognized that this was the way that human beings. We didn't have ophthalmoscopes. We weren't looking at human eyes with, powerful magnification and so forth and so on. So we never noticed it. But boy, all you need is one magnifying glass, and there you see it. Now, what really interested another guy that we're talking about in a moment, Jose Aste-Tonsman, is that there's the same triple reflection as in the left eye, following the curvature this time of the left cornea, going in the other direction. There he is, the same bearded Spaniard Castilian face. We can see him very clearly in that left eye. And then, it's a really complex matter to try and coordinate the curvature of the image of the left cornea with the curvature of the right cornea in the right eye. I mean, to try and do this, it's mathematically, it is a big, complex algorithm. Well, a guy named Jose Aste-Tonsman, Dr. Jose Aste-Tonsman, who really got his doctorate here in the United States, basically showed, he did develop the complex algorithms to make the transposition of the two images, and from Cornell University, and he basically shows that the Purkinje-Sampson from the left cornea curvature and the right cornea curvature are identical. In other words, they perfectly resemble human anatomy, and you can see that it is a perfect, nobody could have done this. I mean, even today, to even attempt this on the level, we're talking, look at how small her, I'm not sure where the image is here, but look at how small her cornea area is. How are you going to do this? I mean, how are you going to produce this perfect, Purkinje-Sampson effect? Answer, you're not going to do it. I mean, this one is a naturalistically, scientifically inexplicable, humdinger. I mean, I just don't think it can be naturalistically, scientifically explained. I think it's out of the question. I just don't think it can be humanly explained, even with the technologies that we have today. But it gets even better. What I'm going to, before I talk about Jose Aste-Tonsman, I want you to see that you can actually, now remember, this painting was made on a flat, opaque surface. How much depth do you have on something painted in 2 dimensions on a flat, opaque surface? Should have next to none. Yet, if you take an ophthalmoscope, right, and of course you can, you put an ophthalmoscope on the picture of Our Lady's eyes, right? Well, in this case, it would be a photograph that's taken, a very highly precise photograph that's taken. You would never put the ophthalmoscope on the Tilma, but you can do it on the photograph. But the main thing to notice is that when you look at those eyes through the ophthalmoscope, right? An ophthalmoscope will literally, illuminate, the back of the area if you have a lens of the right focal length in the ophthalmoscope. So if you have a wrong focal length lens, you're not going to get any illumination, from the eye itself. It won't fill up the iris. It won't fill up the pupil with any kind of illumination if you've got the wrong focal length. So if you put on a regular lens with the right focal length on the eyes of Our Lady in the Tilma, her eyes will illuminate. Her eyes will illuminate. You take that lens out and you put a lens of the wrong focal length in there, nothing will illuminate, just like a human eye. Now, you can go right along the whole surface of the cornea, and that surface of the cornea, it's painted on a 2-dimensional surface. You should get no depth of field, none. Yet, every time you apply an ophthalmoscope to that, you get depth of field. I kid you not. It's as if this has the depth of a real human eye. That the curvature is not just a two-dimensional representation, it is a three-dimensional representation. It's almost as if there's not just three-dimensional encoding of information on the tilma. It's as if it has three-dimensional depth of field like a real three-dimensional human eye. Can this be naturalistically explained? Not to my knowledge. The doctor who basically did the ophthalmologic examinations for the first time, Lavoisier was his name, basically was so baffled by this, he just said, well, I don't think this can be naturalistically explained. How do you convert 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions when we're still looking at a 2-dimensional object? It's bizarre. Now, all that having been said, I want to continue because the mystery gets, more and more, intriguing. Let's take a look. Can you just flip down to the picture of the images in the eyes? Okay, so this guy, Dr. Jose Aste-Tonsman, comes along. So I said, he's this Cornell doctorate guy, worked for NASA for a while. One of his areas of expertise is basically the amplification of light. Well, in this case, he was amplifying light in distant galaxies and trying to come up with the star clusters constitutive of the distant galaxies. But you can use a similar technique to amplify those little irises, the corneas of Our Lady's eyes, underneath the area of the iris and underneath the area of the pupil itself. So you can, the technique basically, does this. You can just split like a matrix, right? And you can make 2,500 little pixelated intersections there. So you get 2,500 pixels, right? And then what Aste-Tonsman can do is see the exact amount of light in each of those pixels. And then you can replicate that light in the exact relative proportion to a 2,500 times magnification. And you can basically blow up the image on the corneas of Our Lady's eyes. You can blow it up, you can amplify it 2,500 times with pretty good exactitude. Now, when you do that, amplify, you got to eliminate some noise, right? The fabric is going to produce, a ton of noise. You're going to have a ton of noise that comes from the intersection of things that have nothing to do with the image itself. But luckily, you can use computers to eliminate a lot of that noise, a lot of the interference that doesn't have to do with the images themselves. Now, when you do that, basically you get an image that kind of looks like this. Is that up there, Kathleen? Okay. And now you can see just moving, from the left to the right, you see a native there, that's a Native American that's looking up, in a sitting position, looking up. You can see next to the native, you see, basically you can kind of see Zumaraga there. Now, he's got a kind of a high forehead. Can you sort of see him? He's in a Franciscan robe. Can you see kind of the white beard there that he has? Can you see it a little bit? Yeah. Okay, so you can see him. He's the bishop, and he's kind of sitting in a little bit of a throne position there. Right next to him, talking into his ear, is a Juan Gonzalez, the translator of the bishop, and he's kind of speaking a little bit, his head is close by the bishop's, kind of speaking into his ear there. And then, of course, right next to him, You see Juan Diego. We'll talk about him in just a moment because he is, of course, the principal guy. Can you see he's just sort of maybe letting down at the Tilma a little bit, but it looks kind of blank, the Tilma does. Can you see that just a little bit or not so much? He has a mustache and he has a beard. He has Indian features, and you can sort of see that. And then you can, if you just keep proceeding, there's an African serving girl who is standing there, and then we have our fellow, the Castilian man with the beard, with the Castilian face, stroking his beard. So you might be able to make out a few of those figures there, and you can get the impression. Now, Daniel Castellano, much as I agree with 98% of what he says, he basically says, with a 2,500 times amplification, you're basically dealing with cloud gazing here. So he basically said, well, Aste Tonsman's a nice fellow, but this is really, he's done some great scientific work, but this is basically cloud gazing. It, the pictures, you can see what you want into them, but really you can't, because Aste Tonsman got mad at this accusation, and what he did was he made an Apple book. And if you guys want it, you have to put it on an Apple device. But what you do is just go to Eyes of Our Lady of Guadalupe by Dr. Jose Aste Tonsman. Just go to that and put Apple book. And then you can download that Apple book onto your Apple device. When you do that, he's got these videos there that are absolutely, the reason he had to do it as an Apple book is because he has tons of moving videos. But what Aste Tonsman did was he went through and he's got a whole table of every single, transition coefficient and every single transition formula that he used to convert the curvature of the left cornea to the curvature of the right cornea when Our Lady has a slight tilt to the left and is standing 2.5 feet above the ground. Okay, so 45? 2.5 feet above the ground. So you can, and then he's got a moving video there, which I don't have on my screen, but next time I do this, I will have it on my screen. I just got to swipe it from the Apple book. But the main thing is, you can actually see as he takes this image and he transports it from the left cornea and superimposes it on the right cornea, the images become even more evident than the image you're looking at. It becomes absolutely apparent when you do the transposition because, frankly, with all of the algorithms and transition coefficients in place, that is a perfect fit from the left to the right cornea. This is way more than cloud reading, ladies and gentlemen. This is like you can see those images as clear as day. I mean, there's no cloud reading about it anymore. But do you know the odds of actually producing, by any chance, these two images from this amplified surface of the corneas of Our Lady? What are the odds of actually making a perfect transposition from left to right corneas with all of the curvature elements, the transition coefficients in place? By pure chance, it would be like monkey typing the first couple of scenes in Macbeth by random tapping of the keys perfectly in a single try. This didn't happen by chance. This is not just some random patterning that just happened to occur in both eyes that can be transposed perfectly to get a very, very clear image. I think this is no more cloud reading than the man on the moon. The image you're looking at there is what is actually taking place on December the 12th, according to the Julian calendar in 1531. That's what's happening. Now, what Osde Tonsman did, and this is another moving image, if you can get to the mouse there, you can see that what he did was he tried to show you, take this image and then just put it right, transport it into the little cornea there of Our Lady's eye to show you how remarkable this is, that this is present, not just in the right cornea, but in the left and right cornea with perfect parallels, taking into account all the transition coefficients. Just take a look at that. Can you see it? Is it moving? Yes. Okay, so you can see, that, and just let it play for just a moment, because I think people will see that image very clearly as it's being kind of, moved into that center area. I mean, how are you going to duplicate this in this corneal area on the image? I mean, you just not. It's not humanly produced. It's not an accident. It's not cloud gazing. It's the real deal. And so I'll just leave it at that. I think you can see that this is really amazing. I'll just sum up before I get to the stars on Our Lady's mantle. I don't think this image can in any way be naturalistically explained. But you can see this image here. What is Our Lady is portraying is, here's what I'm seeing. Juan Diego comes with his Tilma there, and Our Lady is observing the whole thing from 2.5 feet above the ground, right between where Zumarraga and Juan Diego are, looking at the entire scene with her tilting down, looking down, because she's standing above the entire scene. You can get the general impression here. So what do I find non-scientifically explicable? What is scientifically inexplicable in this painting, which I consider to be, because it is scientifically inexplicable, very probably a miracle, that is to say, supernatural origin. The longevity of the agave cactus fiber, Tilma. I don't think it can be scientifically explained. The actual pigments in the Tilma itself, the fact that they don't decompose, they don't fleck, they don't even lose their luster, I don't think it can be scientifically explicable. The fact that it's not a synthetic there were no synthetic pigments, that it doesn't seem to be any naturally known pigment that is there. Where did this pigment come from? At least it's a question, even though it's not a question of scientific inexplicability. Where did the pigment come from? Clearly, probably not from any artist at the time. The third thing, of course, is that there's no sizing whatsoever. This is created right on a bumpy, irregular agave cactus Tilma. I don't think that this can be scientifically explained at all. I think, without any sizing, without any over varnishing, how could the paint, not be flecking and flaking all over the place because of the irregularities on the Tilma? I just don't think it can be scientifically explained. No brush strokes, no undersketching, nothing. It looks like, wham, the image just appears as a whole right on the Tilma in all of its irregularities. The next thing, of course, the image has all these irregular protruding threads, and all of them are sitting there being used to make the lips of the Virgin fuller, to make the eyes more lively and deeper, and so forth, to enhance the beauty of Our Lady. How in the world could any artist produce these effects from the irregular fibers within an agave cactus Tilma? These are all inexplicable. But the eyes, That's the baffler. How do you get the Purkinje sense and effect there? And not just for the Castilian guy, but once you take those images that are there, those six figures that I was just talking about, once you take those six figures that are there, they too have the Purkinje sense and effect. How are you going to do that on a level of 2,500 times amplification? But you can see it at 2,500. How are you going to produce that within the eyes of this cornea? I just cannot. I tell you, this is not explicable. How are you going to fit literally this whole retinue, everything that's being looked at in such detail, with such precision, so that you can literally, all the curvature from the left to the right retinas, all of it is truly resembles a human eye, the curvature and depth of a human eye. How are you going to produce those images so that you have perfect coordination? It had to be almost like this is what really happened, and this is what was really reflected. No one reproduced this, and it certainly did not happen by pure chance, definitely scientifically inexplicable. The ophthalmological test of having depth in the eyes of Our Lady, with the correct focal length, the exact focal length that would correspond to a three-dimensional human eye, scientifically inexplicable. This image, I have to tell you, is one big, huge, scientifically inexplicable, and therefore highly probably miraculous image. It's got miracle all over the place. Let me just take two other quick features, and then I can open it up to your questions. The first thing is the mantle of Our Lady. Now, of course, the mantle's kind of the outer garment there, the blue one, compared with the robe, which is the rose-colored one. The main thing is that on that mantle there are stars. Now, some people say, aha, there's gold touching on those stars. Therefore, the stars were painted on. They were not natural stars. Well, that was a very hasty conclusion that was made. In fact, some of those stars were touched up with gold paint, no doubt about it. But we see from two parchments that go back to 1605, those parchments have stars on Our Lady's mantle that look just like the stars that we see on her mantle today. So either all that retouch was done from 1531 to 1605, or the stars were really there. Daniel Castellano believes, yes? Okay. Daniel Castellano believes, thank you, believes that the stars were really there for a variety of historiographical reasons. Okay, why do I make such a big deal about these stars being real and not just, touched up? Because a group of astronomers at the Laplace Observatory in the University of Mexico basically discovered that the position of the constellation, so can you kind of see the constellations, that picture there a little bit? Yes. So if you see those constellations are in a particular important position. They resemble what the exact position of the constellations in the sky above Mexico City on December 12th, according to the Julian calendar, 1531. That would have been, and by the way, you can use, we got enough astronomical software now, you can go right back to that date, on December 12, 1531, and in a microsecond, that computer will replicate the constellations in the sky anywhere in the world, and it's even Mexico City. And this is a perfect resemblance. Those constellations are in perfect relative position to each other, except for one little thing. The constellations are off by just a little factor. It looks like the entire constellation, if you take the cardinal axis, right? So like if you divide that mantle, right down the middle and then right across the middle. And then you take the cardinal axis, that's the one, the vertical one, and you just turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Then you get exactly the image that Juan Diego, if he looked up into the sky, Bishop Zumarraga, if he looked up into the sky, would have seen. So why is it that image is turned 90 degrees, turned clockwise, 90 degrees, so you have to correct it by 90 degrees counterclockwise. Why is it that it was turned 90 degrees in that direction? Because that orientation is the orientation that an observer would have standing outside the heavenly vault. So in other words, if you're geocentric observation, so you're looking from the earth up to the sky at the stars, right? That geocentric observation point would be transformed by 90 degrees of the cardinal axis counterclockwise if the observer, instead of being on the earth looking at the skies, were outside the heavenly vault, looking down from the heavenly vault on the very same stars that were focused above, that were situated above Mexico City at that time, the very same constellations. So in other words, it seems to be that those stars have the positioning of Our Lady standing outside of the entire heavenly vault. I kid you not. Just looking at the constellations that would have been above Mexico City from the vantage point of being beyond the stars instead of geocentric, she has a cosmocentric focus rather than a geocentric focus looking from the earth. Again, how did it get that way? Well, the astronomers at the Laplace Observatory went, that's really, really strange. We can't explain it, but that's the way it is, and that's the way it was. So I leave you to consider this, because I do think it is a miraculous image, and it has just tremendous, remarkable qualities. I didn't even talk about the images in the pupil of Our Lady, just no time to do that. But this is not just an enigmatic Tilma or cloth. This is something truly naturalistically and scientifically inexplicable. It's a sign from Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's a sign of her presence with us. It's a sign that she's beyond the stars, yet she is here present right to the most intimate detail. The very one who's saying, Juanita, where are you going? And she's the very same one that's standing beyond the stars. She's the very same one orchestrating this, Tilma, the production of this Tilma, from exactly the vantage point that she reveals to us, from the positioning of her eyes. And all of this comes to pass, starting in the late 20th century through 21st centuries, almost as if it's designed for a scientific and skeptical age, so that the very science that had formerly produced skepticism now is actually revealing, this miraculous, non-explicable, naturalistically and scientifically inexplicable features of this remarkable Tilma. I think it really does say, I am here, I care about you, I care about humanity, I care about you intimately, like I care for that little Juan Diego and all of the people who have depended on me and put their faith and their trust in their mother. I am your mother, she is shouting out to us, or maybe quietly saying to us through the scientific revelations that have taken place in the investigation of this Tilma. Thanks so much for your kind attention and consideration today.
So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and we have two people with a handheld mic that will come to you, and you can ask your question of Father Spitzer.
Hi, Father. Thank you for that talk. I was really wondering in your studies of the formation of the image, if you maybe see some similarities between it and the Shroud of Turin in the way that the image was formed.
Yeah. The Shroud of Turin actually has a different explanation from the Tilma. They're both miraculous images, no doubt about that. The Shroud of Turin, though, comes from, if I might just digress into a completely different relic here, it comes from what's called particle radiation. And so the image actually comes from a low temperature nuclear reaction in which the entire body simultaneously undergoes nuclear disintegration. And when that happens, essentially the proton deuterons, that's the positive, heavy positively charged particles, are moving up, and they actually embed themselves in the uppermost surface of the fibrils of the shroud. And that's what's producing the image through a process called friability. It's turning the fiber very precisely crispy in the areas where the particles, the protons and deuterons, the positively charged particles, are basically interacting with the negatively charged particles in the cloth. There's also simultaneously a neutron emission that's coming from the body that turns the blood bright red on the shroud, and normally white blood moves from bright red to dark red to brown and then to black in the open air in a few weeks, right? But the blood stains on the shroud are bright red. Well, why is that? Because they were irradiated with neutrons, and when you irradiate blood with neutrons and then put it subsequently out in ultraviolet light, it turns bright red. So we have in the Shroud of Turin the most unique relic in the world. This is, by the way, the most unique image in the world. It has encoded three-dimensional information, not only of the outside of the body, but even the inside of the body. And the reason we have such a beautiful and enigmatic and the most unique image in the history of humankind in the shroud is because Jesus actually let his own bodily constituents, the protons and deuterons that constituted his own body, the neutrons that constituted his own body, he let that be the cause, the means through which the image was imprinted on the shroud itself. So we don't just have an image of Jesus after the Passion during his resurrection. We actually have the particle constituents that constituted his body being integral to the formation of that image. And of course, the blood is, of course, authentic. And let's face it, dyes, paints, rubs, etc. do not have AB blood type, human hemoglobin, human immunoglobulins, human whole blood, human bilirubin, and human creatinine and ferritin. I don't think so. It's blood. And there's 372 blood stains there, and they're real blood. And the reason they're so bright red is because of neutron irradiation. So that's, in a nutshell, how'd that get there? Miracle. Do you know what the odds are of having a simultaneous disintegration with a low temperature nuclear reaction, a bright flash, then a boom, then a proton deuteron flux, and a neutron flux, all at the same moment occurring in any other human body besides this one? Yeah, it's the same odds as the monkey typing the first scene of Macbeth by random tapping of the keys perfectly in a single try. It's a miracle. And for all intents and purposes, that is the key, difference, similarity between the two images. But the image of Jesus, you touch that image, you're touching the particles that actually constitute his body. Not just his blood from the Passion, but the actual particles that constituted his body embedded in that fabric. Good. Yes, other question.
Thank you, Father Spitzer. And I wanted to thank you for sharing your gifts for God's will and for the work of God. That's very beautiful. But what is the story behind her being pregnant, and what was her message at the time that she appeared to Juan Diego, and why she appeared pregnant?
Yes. Actually, you can see that she is pregnant. You can tell also by the color of her sash. This would have been, the Indian symbolism as well of pregnancy. So no question about it, Our Lady is pregnant. I think the key message for everyone of every age is that the family is good. Children are good. Protect the children, protect the life, protect the family. That's good. Now, I think she sent a special message to our age in the 21st century. Now, what I didn't talk about in my talk today, and I'm going to digress for just a couple of minutes to talk about it, is that, as I said, these images, these 6 images, right, the Indian sitting down, the Bishop Zumaraga, the translator, etc. Those images are on the surface of the irises. Remember, the iris is the colorful part of the eye. The pupil, the black part, which is a really refined and small place, right, of the eye, the center place where, light can, permeate and go to the retina, which transfers the electrical signals to the brain. That little pupil area there, that also contains its own image. Now, again, I didn't put it up here because it's a little too difficult to talk about. But here's what Auste Tonsman discovered, that there was yet another image in that pupil area. And in there is a family in that pupil area. You can clearly see the father with a kind of a top hat stick. You can see the mother, with a kind of they call it a rebozo, I guess, but a little seat strapped to her back there, or to her, could be to her front too. You can see the 2 figures pretty clearly. And Kathleen, can you just, like on that image there, can you just point out to them where you can sort of see a little bit of the rebozo, you can, like a papoose. You can sort of see that there. You can also sort of see the hat of the man in the center there. That's the father. But if you really look at this separately under amplification, I should have brought some pictures of it to you. You can actually see the grandmother and the grandfather there, almost, there. And sort of the extended family. Now, obviously, they look like 1531 Indian family. But what's the message to us? We're the only ones who can see it. I mean, we have the technology to amplify, to magnify the image, to use computers to reduce the noise in the image, and then produce the transition coefficients and transition formulae to do a superimposition to check the accuracy of the actual imaging, to make sure we're not reading, cloud reading on the image. So she's doing something, she's giving a message to us. The only real generation since the time of the production of this image of Our Lady, we're the only generation that could do this, that could actually produce it. So what she's saying, the same thing that the pregnancy sash, that the protruding abdomen is saying, namely, life is good, children are good, family is good. The undermining of the family, right? What's close to Our Lady's heart? The family and young life. It's almost as, that quote of Jesus, I tell you, anyone who harms one of these little ones, I tell you, their angels look directly into my Father's eyes. Get it? In other words, he's very serious about this, and I've always thought this even since I was in high school. But the main thing to see is, the centrality the importance of the family, certainly for the perpetuation of the species, but that's not the real reason. It's God's will. It's God's plan. It's God's goodness. And kids, of course, they can have their challenging moments, but they are also the greatest delight imaginable. The creativity, the joy, the interaction, and above all, the love of these kids that redound right back to us in our love for them is truly one of the greatest things about human existence. So civilizing, and without it, we can become so barbarian. So my point is, I think that's what she's saying in Spitzerian terms. No?
Hi, Father. Thank you. I'm curious. You said that the outside and the moon in the back was added. Do you know why and when?
Say it again.
The part of the painting that was added later that we strokes and is actually, you know why it was added and when?
Yes, sometime after 1605, probably, sometime after 1605, but probably before 1751 or so, these, obviously, two painters were commissioned to put the rays in, the angel in, and the moon in. Just exactly who did it, when they precisely did it, we do not know. But the fact is, it's clearly paint. It's clearly not part of the original image. It's clearly decomposing. It's lost its luster hundreds of years ago. It's got now almost that element of tarnishing, etc. I think the reason they put it in was because, of course, they wanted to make it parallel with Revelations 12. The lady, of the sun, who is clothed with the sun, which is who is coming into the world bearing her child. So I think they saw in the pregnancy of Our Lady portrayed there. Of course, that's the little child Jesus that is truly the source of life for us. But in the Revelations 12, obviously the evil spirit is coming to destroy that child. And, obviously that doesn't happen because, God is protecting her. But the main thing, though, is I think that's why they did it. They wanted the parallel, but it is definitely a human production. But that doesn't say anything, about the actual image itself, which is authentic as all get out. I don't think any human being could have produced that image in the way that we have it. Not a chance. So I think, it's a very much a miraculous image, but it was painted, yes.
Thanks. One thing about the image that I notice is there's a really beautiful floral pattern on Our Lady's garments. Is there any additional facts or information that you kind of gather from that?
Well, not like the stars, no. So, but interesting. It may have meant something to the Native Americans, who were looking at it, to the natives. But as far as I know, it does not have any significance that I'm aware of. Thank you. All right, well, I'll be signing books in the back then, and if you want them, please pop by. Again, my hour and 90 minutes, you guys, you can take the torment. You're real solid people and very much troopers indeed. So God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Spitzer. Let's give him just a few minutes to get to the back. Also, be sure to visit the diocesan website for the dates and locations of where the missionary image will be. by going to rcbo.org/Tilma. Have a good night.